Wonderful. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about what I do and what I'm going to be sharing with you. I'm an executive coach. I have a global clientele, and I have a very specific niche in coaching. I coach very successful persons, typically senior leaders and entrepreneurs, who are driven. They really want to make a dent in the universe. But at the same time, they have an explicitly spiritual bent that they would like to bring to every aspect of their life. So, as a leader and as an entrepreneur, there are decisions you have to make. Should I spend $50 million on this initiative or not? Should I hire this person for a key executive slot or not? So, when you're making decisions like that, how does spirituality play into it? That is the sandbox in which I play. So today, what I'm going to share with you, how many of you, by the way, feel that you are under any kind of tension? Do you feel stress? Raise your hands if you do. I'm going to show you how you can greatly, greatly, greatly diminish, possibly eliminate the stress in your life. And I am going to be sharing some concepts. And I'm going to talk to Henry about possibly doing another one of these at a later date. And if you follow all of those, stress will completely leave your life. Okay? So let's get started. There's some concepts that I'd like to share with you. And probably one of the most important concepts, maybe the most important concept, is something called mental chatter. Mental chatter is an internal monologue that you have going on in your head all the time. It begins when you get up in the morning, is with you throughout the day, and is with you right now. Mental chatter is the thing that goes, what is this guy saying? Do I have mental chatter? Is this going to be useful? Maybe I'd be better off checking my email. I can get away with it if I hold my iPhone under the table. That's mental chatter. You've always had it. It's very much a part of your life. In fact, most likely you didn't even think about your mental chatter until I explicitly drew it to your attention. So, what do we do about mental chatter? We ignore it, we suppress it, we work around it, we do our best to get on with our lives despite our mental chatter. It's like an unwelcome relative who's shown up in your life, at your home, and you can't kick him out. This is a huge error. The reason it's a huge error is because you construct your life with your mental chatter. Let me repeat that. You construct your life with your mental chatter. You do not live in a real world. You live in a construct. It's as if every single one of you was living in the matrix. Only this is not a matrix created by an alien civilization out to control you. It is a matrix that you constructed with your mental chatter and your mental models. And having constructed it, you experience it as you have constructed it. Now, if this sounds kind of abstract, let me explain by means of a story. And I want to share a very powerful parable with you. This is a parable of the second arrow, and it goes right back to the time of the Buddha. The Buddha asked his follower, Ananda, Ananda, if an arrow were to hit you in the arm, would it not be very painful? And Ananda nodded his head. Yes, Lord, it would be very painful. Then Ananda asked a second question. Buddha asked a second question. And if a second arrow were to hit you exactly where the first arrow hit you, would it not be even more painful? And Ananda nods his head. Yes, Lord, it would be even more painful. And then the Buddha asks a surprising question. He says, why then do you shoot the second arrow? Now, I notice some of you looking puzzled, so let me explain, and I'll explain by means of a story. There was this woman, good looking, intelligent, successful, and she had a very messy divorce. It took her a long time to recover from it. But gradually, in bits and pieces, she put her life together and decided she was ready to explore. So she went to all the internet sites and filled in her profile. And she met this guy. He was an entrepreneur and very, very funny and very successful. And most of all, he really seemed into her. So after a month or so of WhatsApping and messaging, they decided to meet in an upscale Manhattan cafe. And she was all excited and she bought a new dress and they met. And 15 minutes into that meeting, he gets up, he throws his napkin on the table and says, "I'm not interested," and walks out. And she was crushed. She was so down that the only thing she could do was call her friend. And her friend said, "Well, why are you surprised? You have fat hips. You have nothing interesting to say. Why would a handsome, intelligent man pay any attention to you?" Now, are you shocked that a friend would say something like this at this juncture? Raise your hands if you are. All of you are shocked. Here's a question. Would you be less shocked if I told you this wasn't what her friend told her? It's what she told herself. Raise your hands if you're less shocked at that. In fact, you're probably not shocked at all, right? That is the second arrow. And the second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. Let me repeat that. The second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. Rejection is bad enough. Does it make things better to tell yourself that you are physically unattractive and socially maladroit? Of course not. But she did it anyway. And you do it all the time. In fact, for most of my coaching clients, if I could get them to stop at the second arrow, they'd be way ahead of the game. By the time they recognize what's going on, they're on their fifth, ninth, or 386th arrows. Mark Twain said it beautifully. He said something which is very funny, but also very profound. Mark Twain said, "I have suffered a great many tragedies in my life, most of which never happened." Now, that is very funny, but it's really very profound. And I'm now going to make a blanket statement to you. No matter what situation you have in your life right now, a situation of concern, I don't care what it is, your mental chatter about that situation is making it at least an order of magnitude worse. Let me repeat that. Your mental chatter about the situation that is of concern to you is making it at least an order of magnitude worse. And you're going to experience that right now because we're going to do a small group exercise. What I would like is in your small group, Laura, can you arrange it that we have groups of 4?
Yeah, everyone's in groups of 4 at their table.
You'll have to speak a little louder.
Everyone's in group support at their table.
All right, fair enough. So here's what I want to do. I want you to describe to members in your group what is the situation of concern you have. And I will warrant you that the situation of concern you have is not just what's happening, but the story you are telling yourself about what's happening. That's your mental chatter. And all I want you to do is I want you to be aware of it in yourself. And it's a little bit more difficult for you to be aware of it yourself, but much, much easier for you to become aware of it in the situation of the persons in your group. But as you get familiar with that, you'll see, hey, this is true of me also. And that's the sole thing that I need to accomplish in this exercise. Okay, so we're going to begin now. Let's give you 10 minutes for that. Describe the situation of concern in your life and see how your mental chatter is exacerbating it and making it at least an order of magnitude worse, okay? And I'll give you 10 minutes for that.
Thank you.
Everybody, I'm sorry to break up your interesting discussions, but we need to move on. So just a quick show of hands. How many of you recognize that your mental chatter about your situation of concern is making it worse? Did you get a feel for that? Raise your hands if you did. Wow, virtually everybody. And that is absolutely true because the vast majority of your problems come not from something that has happened, but the stories you tell yourself about what's happened. Now, here is a takeaway for you. And this is something you can start doing immediately. And let me tell you that it's extraordinarily easy to begin. It's extraordinarily difficult to persist in it. So what you have to do is you have to start observing your mental chatter. And you can see that this mental chatter is going on, and it's very easy for you to observe it. Yes, it is. You know, I'm thinking, is this useful? That's mental chatter. The difficulty is that in very short order, maybe 10 seconds, you go back to being your mental chatter rather than the observer of your mental chatter. And when you're the observer of your mental chatter, it takes you to all kinds of places you do not want to go. So what do? Well, what you can do is remind yourself constantly to observe your mental chatter rather than being your mental chatter. Here is something that I do. I have a smartphone, and I guess all of you have a smartphone too. So I've set up alarms, and you can see how many I have. Right? Can you all see? I set about 15 or 20 at random, and anytime my alarm goes off, it is an instant signal for me to begin observing my mental chatter rather than becoming my mental chatter. So if you're patient and persistent, you will get to the point when you're more the observer of your mental chatter than your mental chatter. And as you do, you'll find that the stressful situations in your life become much less so because you no longer believe the stories that you're crafting and telling yourself about it. Okay? It's a very powerful technique, and I advise you to begin, preferably begin today. All right. How would you like another exercise which will make you incredibly resilient? We all know what resilience is, right? Resilience is your ability to bounce back from adversity. Resilience is good, but I'm a big fan of extreme resilience. And in extreme resilience, you bounce back from adversity so quickly that an external observer might not even know that you have been struck by an adverse event. How would you like to know how to do that? Raise your hands if you would. Again, virtually everybody. So I've got to share an example with you here, okay? This comes from an old Sufi tale, so let me tell you the tale. There was a man and his son, and they lived in a beautiful valley, and they were very happy. But they were also dirt poor. And the man got sick and tired of being poor, and he decided that he was going to become a wealthy man. And he decided the way he was going to become a wealthy man was by breeding and selling horses. So he bought a stallion. He didn't have enough money to buy a stallion, so he borrowed very heavily from the neighbors. And the very day he got the stallion, it kicked the top bar loose from the paddock where he housed it and ran away. And all the neighbors came running around. You were going to become a rich man, but your stallion has run away. And you still owe us money. You are screwed. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That stallion fell in with a group of wild horses, and they were close to where the man lived, and he was able to entice them into his paddock, which he had repaired, so escape was no longer possible. So all of a sudden, he had the stallion back, plus about a dozen wild horses. And by the standards of that village, that made him a wealthy man. And the neighbors came around envious. We thought you were destitute, but fortune has smiled upon you. How lucky you are. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? The man and his son started to break the horses so they could sell them on the market. And one of the horses threw the man's son and stomped on his leg, and it broke, and it healed crooked. And all the neighbors came around again and said, he was such a fine young lad, and now he will never be able to find a girl to marry him. How sad. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That summer, the king of the country declared war on a neighboring country, and press gangs moved through the villages, rounding up all the able-bodied young men to serve in the army. But this man's son was spared because he had a crooked leg. And the neighbors came around and they were crying, we don't know if we'll ever see our sons alive again, but you still have your son. How lucky you are. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And it goes on like that forever. Now, I want you to think about something. Whenever an event happens, any event, it does not bring suffering. Let me repeat that. Whenever an event happens, any event, it does not bring suffering. Let's say you get fired. Okay, you now have a lot of spare time. But if you say, oh my God, I got fired, how am I going to meet my mortgage payments? My kid's tuition is due. This is terrible. And the moment you decide this is terrible, at that instant suffering begins. Let me repeat that. Whenever an event happens, any event, it does not cause suffering. Suffering doesn't begin when an event happens. Suffering begins the moment you decide this is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it. Now, this is important. Do you recognize the truth of what I'm just telling you? Again, raise your hands if you do. Suffering does not begin when an event occurs, any event. Suffering begins the moment you decide this is bad. And sometimes you decide very, very, very quickly. But there is still a gap. Okay? Now, here is the reason that's important. Can you visualize your life, look back on all the stuff that's happened in your life, and can you remember any incident which at the time it happened seemed terrible. This is bad. But now that you can look back on it with the perspective of time and history, you say, hey, that wasn't so bad after all, or maybe even it was a good thing. Let me give you an example. For many years, I was chairman of the marketing department at Long Island University. And one day, should have been a routine election. There was a coup d'etat. Some members, faculty members who I was sure were very happy with my being chairman, abruptly switched sides and I was voted off. And it was a complete surprise to me. And it was a big blow to my ego. I was convinced this was terrible and I was plotting revenge against all the people I suspected who were against me. Same kind of thing Donald Trump is doing, only he's doing it on a much bigger scale. But looking back on it, I was an arrogant son of a bitch, and that hurt to my ego was well deserved. But more important than that, as a result of the fact that I was no longer chairman of the department, I had a lot more spare time. And in that spare time, I created a new course called Creativity and Personal Mastery. And that course took off like a rocket. I taught it at many of the world's top business schools. I taught it for many years at London Business School. And in fact, it was while I was teaching that course at London Business School that I met Henry. And that's how it's coming around that I'm speaking to you today. And that course completely changed my life. It became an extremely popular course at many of the world's top business schools. I got an immense amount of publicity. I was everywhere: New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Forbes, Business Week, Independent, London Times, Daily Telegraph, virtually every major newspaper or business paper in the UK and North America covered it at some point or the other. I got my TED Talk. It completely transformed my life. And it would not have happened if there had not been that coup that forced me out of my position. So, whenever something happens, don't be in a hurry to label it, this is bad. Okay? So, what you can do is whenever something happens and you're about to say, oh my God, this is terrible, pause for a second and ask yourself the question, is there any conceivable way in which this thing, which I'm about to label bad, is there any conceivable way that in X years it could turn out to be good? Just ask yourself, is there any possible scenario by which it could turn out to be good? Just asking yourself that question will move you to a different emotional domain. You'll move from being concerned, being apprehensive, to being questioning, curious, hopeful. Is there any conceivable way in which in X years this could turn out to be good? And then ask yourself the next question. What can I proactively do to actually make this a good situation? And you move seamlessly from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. I must tell you that this is an extremely powerful exercise. I've met people who've taken my course 20 years ago, and I haven't had anything to do with them in the meantime. And I meet them and they say, Professor Rao, I must tell you that exercise you gave us, good thing, bad thing, I use it every day. And it has been immensely responsible for the success I've achieved in my life. Thank you. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? It's an easy catchphrase. anytime you struck with a situation and you're bothered about it, before you label it bad, just step back and ask yourself, is there any conceivable way by which this could actually turn out to be a good thing? And then ask yourself, what can I proactively do to actually make it a good thing? And that is the basis of the next exercise you're going to do. You're going to get back into groups of four, and you're going to describe a situation in your life right now that you say, oh, this is bad. And examine it with the help of the people in your group. How could it happen? Is it at all possible that a few years back you look back on this and laugh and say that was a turning point and that was a good thing that happened to me? And then what can I do today to actually make it a good thing? So just try it in small groups of four. And once again, I'm going to give you 10 minutes for that. Sorry to break up your interesting discussions, but I've shared the exercise with you, and let me assure you that if you utilize this, it will greatly, greatly, greatly help you in any downturn that you face in your personal life. Now, just by a quick show of hands, how many of you recognized as a result of this exercise that maybe the situation you are concerned about isn't that serious after all? Raise your hands if you realize that. Number of you did. Let me repeat what I told you earlier. I've had people take my course 2 decades ago, and they came up to me afterwards and said that was the most important learning that they got from that course. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? Remember that. And there are companies I've spoken to where the CEOs told me years later, you know, you've really changed the language with which we address it. And something happens and someone immediately goes, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And not only does it lighten the atmosphere, it gives them a different action to take. Okay? Now I have one more exercise, and I want to know: do we have time for that, or should I terminate now?
Yes, you have time.
Oh, we've got rebels in the room.
So, what's the story? Yes, no.
Yes.
All right. I'll try to make this a short one. And if you're interested in what I shared with you so far and you'd like more, what you really have to do is pester Henry. And Henry is very amenable to being pestered, as I know from my experience with him. All right, let me share another one, and I'll make this a quick one. And once again, I'll begin with a story. This one comes from the Native American tradition. And it talks about a young man who is growing up to take his place among the adults of the tribe. And the final rite of passage was a conversation with the medicine man. And the medicine man told him, here is this wolf, malevolent, vicious, ready to snap at and kill anything, anybody. And here is his dog, kind, intelligent, loving, trustworthy. And the dog and the wolf are fighting. And the dog and the wolf are both inside you. And the young man asks, which one will win? And the medicine man says, whichever one you feed. Now think about this. Inside each one of us are altruistic, let's help each other and make the world a better place impulses. And inside each one of us are, let me grab everything I can for myself, and the devil take the hindmost impulses. And the two are always at war. It is your job to selectively identify and feed the dog in you. It is also your job to selectively identify and feed the dog in everyone that you meet. And when the dog in you becomes friends with the dog in the other person, magic happens in both your lives. All too often, we feed the wolf both in ourselves and the other person, and we never recognize that this is what we are doing. Let's say you're having a bad day at work and you go to the coffee machine, and a colleague comes up to you and says, I'm having a bad day at work. And you go, You're having a bad day at work? Let me tell you about my bad day at work. And your bad day at work trumps his bad day at work, and you go off feeling smug. You've just fed the wolf, both in yourself and the other person. If instead you had gone, You're having a bad day at work, I'm having a bad day at work, we both work here. Is there any way in which we could collaborate and make sure that nobody has such a bad day at work again? And now you have started feeding the dog. And this is particularly important because most of the time when we have a conversation, we're very focused on this is what I want to convey. We're not focused on what is the likely impact of what I'm sharing upon the other person. And this is particularly true today in these terms of political turmoil. I see it all the time in America. Oh, Trump did this. And have you heard what else Trump did? He did that. And you have a conversation going with two people who are all irritated about our revered leader. They're feeding the wolf. And they don't even recognize that they're doing it. So I invite you to consider in every interaction you have with everybody in your life, with your spouse, with your children, with your colleagues, with your boss, with the Uber driver who takes you to Heathrow, ask yourself, am I feeding the dog or am I feeding the wolf? Am I talking or behaving in a manner which leaves this person in a better, positive frame of mind? Or am I saying something that pulls him down into a negative vortex? Am I feeding the dog or am I feeding the wolf? And ask yourself that about every interaction that you have. And you'll recognize something funny. You cannot feed the dog in somebody else without automatically feeding the dog in you. And as you continue doing that, the dog in you will become a very, very, very healthy, energetic animal. And you will find your experience of life has changed. So we're going to do our final 10-minute exercise. You're going to break up into groups, and you're going to describe to members in your group what is the last significant interaction you had with anybody. And looking back on that interaction, were you feeding the dog or were you feeding the wolf? Were you feeding the fears, the anxieties, the insecurities? Or were you projecting an optimistic view of what the world is going to be like? Were you feeding the dog or were you feeding the wolf? So just recognize that for yourself. And I'll tell you what the nickable is. The nickable is you're going to examine what you're saying with the viewpoint of not this is what I want to get across and get off my chest, but what impact is this likely to have upon the person with whom I'm having the interaction? Okay? So begin, and once again, you have 10 minutes for that. And after you're done with that, we're done with this session. So, how many of you have become aware that you are inadvertently feeding the wolf in the conversations you have? All right, so we've come to the end of our interesting session. So let me give you the nickables once again, okay? First of all, imagine that you're going for a walk and you look up at the sky and there are clouds in the sky. You finish your walk and you look up at the sky and those clouds have gone, but there are fresh clouds in the sky. Those clouds are like mental chatter. They come and they go. They're not significant. Your problem is not mental chatter. Your problem is that you identify with your mental chatter. And when you identify with your mental chatter, it takes you to all kinds of dark places. If you simply observe your mental chatter like you observe the clouds in the sky, there's no problem at all. They come and they go. So, nickable number one, be sure that you are the observer of your mental chatter and don't become your mental chatter. And a good tool for that, as I showed you, is to set up multiple alarms on your smartphone. And each time the alarm pings, get back into being the observer mode. And if you do it consistently, you will find that you're more the observer than the mental chatter itself. And once again, your experience of life will improve dramatically. Second, whenever something happens in your life and your immediate reaction is, oh my God, this is terrible, pause. Ask yourself, is there any conceivable way in which this could actually be a good thing? And then ask yourself the next question, how can I make this a good thing? And that's how you become extremely resilient. You never have to bounce back from adversity because you never label anything that happens to you in adversity. Another powerful exercise. And finally, in every conversation you have, stop thinking about yourself and what is the message you want to convey or the impact you want to have. Instead, ask yourself, what impact is this likely to have upon the person with whom I'm having this interaction? And how can I feed the dog, not the wolf? And as I mentioned to you earlier, you cannot feed the dog in somebody else without automatically feeding the dog in you. So those are the nickables. Go use them. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your life. Fun being with you, folks.